thank you so much for taking the time. It's
Cool,
going to be
definitely.
going to be my highlight of the year when you guys get over. I remember as a young kid being there back in 1990 when you hit the UK for the first time. So,
Yeah, I remember
so
that opening for Dogs D'Amour.
yeah,
Some,
what a crazy lineup. I mean, I was ready to leave after you guys had played. I was absolutely blown away by that. It was crazy. And
yeah, it was fun.
now here we are 32 years later with
Unbelievable.
what must be one of my favorite debut albums of all time. I mean, it's wonderful. It sort of like broke the mold at the time as well. I guess everyone was listening to bands like Bon Jovi and stuff like that, but you guys brought a bit of sort of like soul and if I dare say it, Southern harmony back to the scene.
Yeah, I mean, we never being if being in Atlanta, it wasn't I mean, it wasn't like a music mecca.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Athens had a scene, Atlanta had a scene. There were places throughout the country that had like scenes and they were more indie based. Like, you know, um, there was some stuff going on in Chapel Hill. There was a lot of bands that came out of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, that were part of like the REM thing. So you had like Let's Active, you had the DBs, you had the Flat Duo Jets, and all of these things were sort of interconnected, but none of it really operated on the highest levels. It was all very sort of regional and indie. And REM came out, B-52s, and then REM came out, and it really started small, but it grew big really quickly, and um, it really influenced a lot of people. In the converse of that, in Los Angeles and in New York, it was very music. I mean, those were ground zero for what was happening in popular music. And so what was really happening at that time was like heavy metal music,
yeah.
all the bands that were going on, from Slaughter to Poison to, I don't know, obviously Guns N' Roses and Skid Row, and just 100 bands, and that was all happening at the same time. And what we were always drawn to growing up, like I was talking about this earlier, is like, you know we would go see REM, and REM would play an Aerosmith song.
Yeah.
They would play Toys in the Attic, and then in the same show they would play a Big Star song, and then they'd play a Velvet Underground song, and they would play any number of things. And so we always like, wow, what a really cool approach, like they're not bound to some sort of low level, just like, well, we only play one kind of music or one genre. Like, they're really bringing in a lot of stuff. Wow, that's really fun, interesting. And they would change their sets every night. It was really coming from that um a music scene, and following that independent or alternative sort of mindset. But what through that, it got us back into the roots that Chris and I grew up with. I mean, some of my earliest memories are my dad listening to Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, or Joe Cocker, or Bob Dylan, or Sly Stone, or you know Mose Allison, to Muddy Waters, and anything in between. And so it kind of, through REM and through what was going on, they would do bird songs and all these things, and then it kind of brought us back to where we started. And then if you look at that platform of music, which rock and roll was,
Mm.
it Joni Mitchell was rock and roll to, you know what I mean? And so were the Rolling Stones, but so was, Bob Marley. I mean, not at the same time, but, so was Sly Stone. So was, Neil Diamond. So was Dr. John. So, you know what I mean? Like, the genre was so massive, and it had so much room for all of these different influences to exist within it, that was kind of the platform that moved us, and we chose to work within for
Yeah.
our form of expression. And so taking all that and wrapping it all up in this one, in our sort of route, so to speak, you know, that's what we were influenced by. You know, Every Picture Tells a Story is one of the greatest rock and roll songs of all time. Like, what the fuck
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? Like, what are you gonna do about it? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So that's where we were headed, and it just kind of clicked. In a million years, no one would have ever thought that it would have clicked like that, because Poison, because Bon Jovi, because of all these other things at the same time. But it did. I mean, music is music. Music is. I think it ultimately. I think it comes more down to the intention and the authenticity of what you're doing is far more important than what genre you're doing. And if you're
Yeah.
not full of it, I think that people will be drawn to it.
Oh, absolutely. I always remember what Steve Marriott said once, where he said, if you can sort of like touch someone with a voice and an acoustic guitar and it comes from the heart, you've got a great song. It doesn't matter how you dress it up. And
Exactly.
it's as good as that. I mean, one of the things I love most, I must admit, about Moneymaker, and I've been playing it to death over the last since the tour announcement came in. It was the
Nice.
fact that the ballads on there. I mean, it
Yeah.
was obligatory at the time, I guess, to put a ballad on a rock album. But you guys had three of the best on that album, and to think that She Talks to Angels, you wrote when you were 17. I mean, that still blows me away. It's still one of my favorite songs of all time.
Oh, well, thank you. Um, what's better than a good ballad? Like, you know, I mean, back then it was like the obligatory power ballad is
Yeah,
what everyone was really going for. But again, it all falls back to this sort of formulaic approach to selling music, like, whoa, you need a power ballad. We just wrote these damn songs, like, Sister Luck, or Seeing Things, or She Talks to Angels, or whatever. We were just, they're heartfelt. They really meant something to us. It's definitely, none of those sound like power ballads to me. They just sound like real ballads. But
yeah,
we grew up listening to that. You listen to Otis, and you listen to, I mean, the brilliant ballads of our time, like country music, and uh you know Aretha Franklin, and those, that slow down and that tapping into that sort of element, to me, is can be really powerful. You know what I mean? And all the records we were listening to at that time always had ballads. Look at Sticky Fingers, or you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, I mean, look at, Rod was amazing at singing ballads. So was Marriott. I mean, Jesus.
Mm. Yeah, they were great. I mean, I remember reading a while ago that George put you onto bands like the Faces and Humble Pie and stuff like that, which
Not Humble Pie so much. He introduced us to the Faces. So
mm,
we were firmly planted with like the Stones and with Zeppelin and those kinds of things. But, it was pre YouTube. So, like, not a lot of people had heard of the Faces that much. And George brought us, I remember hearing Every Picture Tells a Story for the first time. And I was just like, I mean, that acoustic 12 string, and Rod, I mean, it was fucking unbelievable.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Oh,
so,
absolutely. I mean, they were a band that sort of like blew me away, and I don't think I'd heard anything as powerful until I heard Moneymaker, which is you can tell when a band loves and appreciates the music they're playing, and I think a lot of the scene by 1990 when the album came out had got, let's say, very formulaic, where everyone was sort of like starting to sound like each other, but.
yeah,
Um,
totally.
me, it was like a breath of fresh air. And then obviously things went on from there. So it's 32 years. COVID delayed since the album. Last time
Yeah.
you saw us was actually one of my landmark birthdays, and I actually followed you guys around the country
Oh, cool.
for your last tour. So
In Australia.
yeah, yeah. So
That
when
was
you
like
came on,
someone told me that was 14 years ago.
it was, yeah.
Jesus, man.
So like
That's crazy.
giving away how old I am. I've been waiting all that time, but you're one of the few bands that I've seen on four continents, so it's going to
Oh,
be
well, that's a
wonderful.
good thing.
It's going to be wonderful to get you back in the backyard again.
Nice.
Obviously, just you and Chris on this tour with some other wonderful musicians. Was there ever a thought of getting the guys from the original, I guess, recording back together?
No, I mean, we have Sven, and Sven's been with us for 25 years. And Sven, I met Sven when I was 14. He was in a rival Atlanta band, and Chris and Steve lived with Sven when Chris first moved out when he was 18 or whatever. So Sven's been in our life for longer than Johnny Colt was, or even Steve for that matter. But he
And
didn't
what,
join. He didn't join till later.
yeah, and wonderful as
Because
well with the Magpie Salute, which was the
oh, thank you.
last time I spoke to you, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Spin's great. But the other guy, like we had a choice to either, like Chris and I decided like a family dynamic is difficult enough as it is, and a band becomes a second family. And there's a dynamic, some dynamics are really good and some dynamics can be really toxic. And with Steve in particular, but also Mark Ford going back to his old ways, so to speak,
Mm.
which was a reason why I just put an end to Magpie, because I'm like, look, I'm not doing this again, with going down that road. Um, and Mark, and then Steve with he's always been that way, manipulative and really trying to keep Chris and I apart. I told someone one time Steve told me the scariest thing to him was when Chris and I were together and got along. And his
Mm.
quote was, because no one could stop you guys from what you wanted to do if you were together. And he just flat out said that one day. I'm like, wow, that's really kind of a weird thing to say. Like, why would you, you know? And so we can account for ourselves and how Chris and I deal with each other, and deal with our own triggers as brothers, but we can account for other people with negative agendas that bring their negativity to us.
Mm.
And so if we got everyone back, it would be just a money grab, and it would be just like, let's do this for one round and go away, because it would indefinitely uh, just fall apart because of everyone with their little petty bullshit.
Yeah,
And
I
so
think
Chris,
that's the
you
best
know what I
answer
mean?
I could have hoped for. I mean that's wonderful because I guess the other thing I really wanted to sort of like ask you was about the new songs because I know you've
Yeah.
which again talks to that getting back together more new Black Crows material. Uh,
Well, of
about twenty.
course. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so the reason we didn't bring anyone back like that was because we want this to be something greater than that.
Mm.
We want to do this right. I mean, not only do we want to be in each other's lives as brothers, and we don't want to go down that negative road, and we don't want to like fall apart and do all this shit, but we also love playing this music together, and we love writing together, and we love being in a band together, and we're good at it. I mean,
Mm.
this is what we do. We've been doing this for 32 years off and on with each other and with our other bands. So it's like, this is something that we really wanted to do. We wanted to do it right, and the best way to do that right is to start with a clean slate and get in and start doing it, and then hence writing these songs and going into the studio. I mean, I've sent Chris 30 songs to date, and to work on. He's got amazing, he's singing amazing, he's you know lyrically and melodically, it's really cool, and we're honing all the stuff in. We're working with George Trikulius again, and we're hoping to go into the studio in February.
So what's
So
this sound like, Rich? I mean, are you looking for that to sort of like look backwards, or is it a progression, I guess, of the last
I
album?
mean, I can't write specifically for something.
Mm.
I just write. I feel like if I was to try to write something, it would be insincere.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it would translate or come across. So I never filter myself and I never push myself in any direction. So I just write music, and whatever moves me is what I go with. And so that's ultimately what I do. So there's, I've got 40 songs to date. We've kind of pulled back 9 of them that maybe would work in a different scenario, like an acoustic record or whatever it may be. So I just write all the time. Chris writes all the time. This is how we do it. And and then at the end of the day, you put all the cards on the table, and it's going to show itself of what the best record's going to be.
So, I mean, you've got a busy time coming up. You just finished the UK, over to Europe, and I think you've got Japan before you see us. Um, I guess in a roundabout way, I'm sort of like saying, when can we expect the new material?
Well, we're supposed to go into pre-production in January, and then we go into the studio in February is the ultimate
Oh,
goal.
mm. That's fantastic. I really appreciate your time today, Rich.
Of course, yeah. Thank
I,
you.
I I can't wait to see you guys over in Melbourne when you arrive here. Stay safe until then.